Hello, everybody, and welcome to World War II Above and Below. My name is Mitchell Babarovich, and on this episode, I am joined by Jeff Copsetta, co-host of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. And Jeff and I just shoot the breeze for about an hour, so buckle in. This is a little bit longer than our usual podcast episode. But you know what? It was a lot of fun to talk to Jeff. Jeff is somebody I've been listening to for a few years over on What's the Scuttlebutt, and those guys served as inspiration for me to kind of get into my own World War II podcasting channel. So I'm a big fan, certainly, of their work. So let's talk a little bit about Jeff. And boy, is he aware of many hats. Husband, father, soldier, teacher, historian, museum director, historical advisor. On top of being a co-host to What's the Scuttlebutt, he is all of those things that I just mentioned. And also, he is a hell of a nice guy. And if you want to sit down and talk World War II for an hour, doesn't get any better than Jeff. So in our 60 minutes of discussion, we talk about Jeff's origin stories of getting into the subject of World War II and how that plays a part in his everyday life in bringing awareness to the subject. Jeff spent a few years working for the National Museum of the Pacific War, and we talk about that, which snowballs into the main part of our discussion, which is Jeff's time as historical advisor on a short film called Walking Point. Walking Point is about a Marine Corps war dog platoon during the Battle of Guam in 1944. That's all I will give you now. The link to that is in the description of whatever platform you are listening to this on. So please go check it out. If you like Dobermans, this is the movie for you. And you like World War II, well, it's just a marriage made in heaven because it is a truly inspirational story. It's a moving story. It's a very authentic story for sure. Unfortunately, the real sad part is the star of the movie, Duke, the four-legged star, Duke the Doberman, just passed away last month, unfortunately, at the age of 9. He was also, not only was he a movie star, but he was also a canine police dog. So just a bummer, a real bummer. And when you watch that movie, you can tell that dog and the folks on that set must have had a great time being around him. And that certainly comes through on screen. And before we get to the episode with Jeff, be sure to go check out our friends at 909 Apparel. Again, I'm wearing another 909 Apparel shirt. This is RAF 302 Squadron. This was a Polish squadron that went ham in the skies over southern England during the Battle of Britain. And it's funny, every time I go record an episode and I get some shots of Tom's website, 909 Apparel, there's always something that Tom puts on there that I just have to go buy. So you're quite a salesman, Tom. You get me almost every damn time. I've even got my wife a few shirts, which luckily for me, she really likes them. So I guess we're going to just keep on giving you our business. So again, big shout out to 909 Apparel. Really love the work they're doing over there, and be sure to go check them out. So with that, let's get to the episode with Jeff Copsetta. And welcome, everybody, to World War II Above and Below. My name is Mitchell Babarovich, joined by a very special guest and someone I've been listening to for a few years, Jeff Copsetta of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. Jeff, thank you so much for doing this. I greatly appreciate it. And it's nice to steal two of you guys away from What's the Scuttlebutt. I had Dennis Blocker on an hour ago, and it was a lot of fun to talk to him about LCIs. And I think we're going to talk about flamethrowers and short films and the 8th Air Force and, all things World War II. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Jeff, where did the interest start for World War II?
Well, I've been asked that several times, and I think I can pinpoint it to I was 4 years old. And so both my maternal and paternal grandfathers served in and around World War II. And it was my maternal grandfather that he would babysit me from time to time. And his view of babysitting me was we had a record player in the living room. And I don't look that old, but we had a record player. And he would put on Victory at Sea, right? The old long play vinyl. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I had a little toy Springfield rifle, and he'd show me how to put it right shoulder arms, and he'd march me around the living room and dining room, while he's reading the newspaper and listening to the music. And I just he passed away before I was the age of 5. So to have a memory that's just that, coherent, right? Just that detailed, I go back to it every time. And I just think that's when I knew the military was in my future. You don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to be a soldier. I'm going to be a Marine. It's kind of instilled in you. It's in my blood. Copsettas have served in the United States military since 1907. My son, who graduates Army Basic Training, he's gonna be a Cab Scout just like me. He graduates this coming Thursday, 12 December, and he's the 5th generation of Copsettas to serve since 1907. So it's in my blood. But I think that to be the first moment that sparked my interest in the military, that's it. And that only grew from there. I was fortunate. I grew up in a little tiny town in South Jersey, right? I've been in Texas for 25 years, but as a kid, grew up in South Jersey. My dad was a police officer there. Most of the family grew up there mainly because my great-grandfather retired out of the Philadelphia Naval Yards. He was in the Navy for over 40 years. And I was fortunate to live right around the block from a Marine that served in World War II. And one of our other neighbors said, "Yeah, I think Mr. Cloud was on Guam." And I didn't know anything about Guam. I was a big Guadalcanal was my thing, right? As a kid, it was the Memphis Belle
Sure.
and Guadalcanal for some reason. And Guadalcanal Diary was the first book I read about the war. I think I was 13. So I walked past this guy's house every day, walking to school, walking to the middle school. So I thought, you know what, I'll stop in. And I, introduced myself. Of course, he knew my dad. And I said, I heard you fought on Guam. And he started laughing. He said, "Nah, who told you that? I wasn't on Guam. I was on Guadalcanal. You ever hear of it?" I was like, "What?" And I started talking about Guadalcanal. And he just was like, "How does this kid know about this nothing place?" He was flabbergasted. And he still, had effects from the malaria. So there were days where we'd sit in his den. He'd have his dark sunglasses on, right, But he would tell me these stories of Guadalcanal. And, of course, he always joked with my parents. He said, he knows, me. He said, that kid knows more about Guadalcanal than I do, and I was there. But then that really gave me this, portal to what it was really like, for that to read something like Guadalcanal Diary, and then you talk to somebody who was there again at such a young age, man. Like I said, I'm like 12, 13, 14 years old here, middle school age. So that was just he was so important. He was my hero. And again, watching, the original footage of, the William Wyler film, Memphis Belle, over and over as a kid too, growing up with that. And then fast forward to about 1995, 96, I get to meet Captain Morgan at an air show. And again, kind of the same relationship evolved where I'm talking to him and he's like, "Oh my goodness, let me bring this kid around this side of the table." And we hung out with him most of the day, on the back side of the display. So it just kind of kept snowballing, man. And when you're into this, you're not into it a little bit. You're not like, "Yeah, I kind of like World War II." Sure. I've never met anybody like, "Yeah, I kind of like it." No, you just.
It's not a dab.
No, not at all. I know people, I kind of am interested in the Civil War. Like, I think Gettysburg, that's interesting. Or I kind of like World War I. I like the airplane. But nobody kind of likes World War II. And that's a testament to how important that time frame was, man. I mean, it's an incredible period of time in so many ways.
You've often said on What's the Scuttlebutt that you don't remember, so talking about getting afflicted by World War II, you don't remember the first thing you saw behind glass. You remember the first thing you held. I'm curious as to what is that item for you? What was that item?
The waist gun of a B-17, the B-17 909.
Okay, yeah, I was on that one a few different times.
Yeah. I still got the picture somewhere. They let me kind of go through. Of course, I'm wearing a bomber jacket. Again, I'm a young teenager.
Yeah.
And Yeah, and I know these things that the crew was like, man, this kid's kind of special, so let's let him kind of go through. And I was in there by myself. My dad was, he's one that took pictures. And I mean, I'm up in the top turret, right? I'm peering over into the cockpit, up into the navigator bombardier compartment, sitting at the radio operator desk, and then, at the waist gun position, just feeling the grips on that 50 cal, and just being able to kind of swing them around, looking out, being able to picture what I've seen so many times in old William Wyler film. That really, like, I don't know, man. There was something about grabbing the grips of that 50 cal, and of course, ironically, 6-7 years later, I find myself as a 50 cal gunner on top of a Humvee in Baghdad in the middle of all that. So that kind of had a special connection in so many ways. But I say that a lot. I preach that a lot because, it's important for the youth today to get a grasp of this. And you can have you can have something amazing under glass with this wonderful plaque that tells you all about it, but a kid's not going to put his phone down long enough to appreciate it. So we got to find ways for them to make a connection. And to me, it's a tactile experience. We're like, wow, this is rough, or this is super smooth, or this is heavy. Wow, this is what it feels like. This is, especially with the video games now. You give a blank firing Thompson to a kid, like, man, okay, Call of Duty used to be cool. Now this is the coolest thing. So that's how you make these connections, man. Because, like I said, you put anything under glass, you're like, wow, that's cool. Try to take a picture. There's glare from the glass. You're like, forget it.
Yep.
Got to hand it to him.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Having been a visitor of several museums, especially over in Europe, everything over there is behind glass, and that's what I like the uniqueness about the United States museums is that there's obviously a lot of stuff behind glass for good reason, but there's more interactiveness when it comes to patrons of those places. And and on the topic of museums, it was What's the Scuttlebutt that convinced my wife and I that within the next year or two, we're actually going to make a trip to Texas and see some of the World War II museums there instead of the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, because you worked at the Pacific War Museum in Fredericksburg and have talked about that place quite a bit, so much so that you sold me on wanting to go see it. Could you talk about your experience there and what that was like for you?
Oh, man. Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the hardest decisions, honestly, of my life to make to work there. And I say that only because you would think, man, this is the dream, right? This is the dream job. But it came at a time when, so prior to that, I was a park ranger, and I'm surrounded by state parks here where I live. We're in the Highland Lakes area, so it's a very, very heavily traveled touristy area, right? And so 15 minutes away was the second most visited state park in Texas, and I was set. Being a park ranger, being a wildland firefighter, it was an amazing experience. 1,200 acres of this is my office. You can't beat this. But I had visited the Nimitz several times, and my oldest boy was about the same age that I was when I started getting into it. So he really enjoyed going down there, and he got picked out at the beginning of one of the living history shows. They do a little kid portion of the program. He got pulled out of the crowd and did really well, naturally. And, got a little behind the scenes tour with the then living history director. And he gave me his business card. He said, hey, you ever want to come hang out with us, volunteer, suit up, whatever, you'd love to have you. Okay, sure. I don't know, 2-3 years goes by. And I'll never forget, I'm at the Napa here in town getting something for one of my old cars. And there was a little display there on the counter that said new and improved Pacific Combat Zone. It was a little postcard for the Nimitz, for the combat zone. I thought, oh, man. And it said, contact this guy, which was the guy I met. I thought, man, I wonder if he remembers me. So I shot him an email like, oh, yeah, I remember you. He said, man, come on down. You're not going to recognize this place. We just dumped $5 million into this combat zone, this complex for living history. I said, oh, yeah, sure. I'll come down there. Well, my schedule as a ranger was I was off every Friday, Saturday. So I went down there on a Friday, met for lunch, and enjoyed walking around the battlefield, got the whole tour and everything. And they said, look, we could really use some help. And he said, look, I've got a part-time position. I'd love to have you on board. I know you could probably only work 1 day a week, but he said, hey, you're 70 miles away, one way. Let us at least put you on the payroll. It'll pay for your gas and maybe lunch every Friday. And I said, deal. So this was in about October of 2016. Went to the Wings Over Dallas Air Show. A few weeks later, went with them, did a weapon demonstration, scared to death in front of thousands of people. Never done anything like this before. And then I want to say right after Christmas, he retires and says, that's my replacement. What? So,
Wow.
yeah, you're thinking, right place at the right time, right? He tells the president of the foundation, who was then General Hagee, 33rd Commandant of the Marine Corps, that Jeff Copsetta is the guy. And of course, General Hagee's like, who the heck is this Jeff Copsetta character? And we talked, came to an agreement. But again, it was like, man, I am vested. I've got a good retirement with the state. It was an amazing job as a Ranger. I was there for over 9 years. And now, and at the time we had 2 kiddos, and now I'm going to commute 70 miles one way to play World War II for a living. And my wife was one, she said, babe, you can't give this up. Like, this is what you were meant to do. Okay, I'm going to get paid to play Army. So inherited about 20, 25 really solid volunteers, living history volunteers down there. And, you don't really get anywhere by keeping things the same. And anybody that if you talk to down there, they'll tell you, I shook things up. We took that contingent of 20 to 25 volunteers and we built it into about 140. It was a company-sized element. I had an XO. I had 4 platoons with platoon sergeants, platoon leaders, had a first sergeant, had a gunny, because we had some Marines, had a bookman and a supply quartermaster and an armorer, several armorers. Had training NCOs. There were 3 of them that really knew the weapon systems that would train the new recruits that came through. Had a custom-made guidon made with a guidon bearer for our formations, our morning formations. I mean, I did it the Army way because that's the only way I knew.
Incredible.
And we had overnight facilities there. There was barracks there. So we had overnight stay for about 50 or 60 of them. Had chow in between the programs. The whole 9 yards, right? So my office was in the main living history building where the quartermaster cage was and the armory. And so we're all right there in the quad. Then we had the motor pool area. And I gave them the military experience that a lot of them never had. What it meant to stand at the position of attention before you fall out, or platoon leaders take care of your platoons, take charge of your platoons, whatever, before they release their platoon. Had a women, we had 4th platoon, which was kind of a conglomeration of the women or the specialty people. We had an Army platoon, a Marine platoon, of course, the OP4, the Japanese platoon. But 4th platoon was kind of my favorite. We had gals that would sing. There were 3 sisters that would give you, they'd give the Andrews sisters a run for their money. And then we had several girls that would demonstrate what Rose of the Riveter or a Navy Wave or, a female Marine or a WAC or a WASP. And they all had their own part in the show. And it was about an hour-long program. And then that of course, the climax of the show was at the very end when we hop into the Marines are in the Amtrak. I'm with the soldiers and the LCVP that came out on rails. And we hit the beach. And if there wasn't 400 people crying at the end of that program, I did something wrong. And I took that job very seriously because it was very unique. And I knew that at the time. There's nobody else that does this. That this is a very unique thing. So reached out I had volunteers from all 5 branches of the service. They were active volunteers. And this is unofficial, but I had somebody go AWOL to do a program with me because they said they were going to be there. So they went AWOL for the weekend.
It's because dedication.
They were, I can't say enough about their dedication. And I know I'm probably a little long-winded, but I'll tell you this, the best program we ever had, I happened to have a buddy that owned a P-51 and who lived here in town. And he had a jump seat in the back, and he had a foundation. I mean, this was not just, he wasn't just a hot rod. He had a foundation where he would fly veterans anywhere they needed to go if the VA didn't cover it. Not in a P-51 and other aircraft. But he loved taking World War II vets up in this P-51. That was really the heart and soul of his, what was called Freedom Flyers. So one day I thought, how can I take this to the next level? We got Army, we've got Navy, we even had a Coastie who was our shore party, right? He knew the signal flags and they're unloading supplies, stuff that people don't do in a reenactment, right? People don't think about the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids coming off of the Higgins boats, right? Nobody reenacts that. We did. You had everything, but we didn't have an air component. So I scheduled an appointment with him one day, and I said, hey, what would it take if you could fly down to Fredericksburg every now and then, give me a little close air support in a P-51? And he said, I'll do it on one condition. Name it. He said, you put a World War II vet in the back seat of that P-51. Deal. So it wasn't every show.
If I have to.
Yeah. Once or twice a year. But the best one I think we ever had, it was in October. It was the October show. I met a MacArthur reenactor who lived in Culver City, California. Guy is spot on. He would come once a year because his wife had family from the Fredericksburg area, so they'd come and visit. So, okay, I've got MacArthur here in October, right? So this is the anniversary of his famous return to the Philippines. And I also, over the summer, that previous summer, I was reading a book written by a Coastie who made 7 invasions in the Pacific as a coxswain on an LCVP. Wonderful book. His name's Ken Wiley. And I contacted Ken Wiley, lived in Mountain City, Tennessee. And I said, Ken, I'm in the middle of your book, and I'm looking on a map at where you live. And I told him, I said, this summer I'm driving back to Jersey because my brother's getting married, and I'd love to shake your hand. And he said, come on by. So I stopped in there, beautiful, picturesque Mountain City, Tennessee, to see Ken Wiley and his best friend, HC. HC was in the 78th Infantry at Battle of the Bulge. And so these two guys had some incredible stories, right? Spent the night there. They put me in a nice bed and breakfast. And when I said goodbye to Ken, I said, look, I know you've been to the Nimitz before. I said, but you need to make one more trip out because we've got this LCVP that's restored. It runs on rails. I've got water charges. I always had a seasick guy, right? I always had to have a guy puke over the rails so the crowd could see every bit of the landing, every aspect of it. And he goes, I might just do that. So sure enough, fast forward to October. I got MacArthur. I've got Ken Wiley there. And I told Ken, I said, look, you can watch the morning show, but in the afternoon, we're putting you to work. And he said, what do you want me to do? I said, you're gonna drive that LCVP. He said, you got a gray steel pot? I said, yes, sir. You got a Mae West? Yep. Oh, and a blue chambray shirt? I said, yeah. He said, I'll do it. Now, at the helm, it did nothing. That was all for show. I drove the boat. All the controls were up by the ramp. So I said, you don't have to do a blessed thing. But what would you be doing? What did you do? What did you say? That's what I need you to do. So here we go. Oh, and by the way, we've got a P-51 with a P-51 pilot in the back seat who flew P-51s in the Pacific. All of this going on in one show. So I hit the button. We're moving forward. The water charges are going off. Water spraying in on us as we're hunkered in on this LCVP. Some dude pukes over the side. Ken Wiley, at 90-some years old, is yelling from the helm, all these different, barking these orders at us. Just before the ramp drops, here comes a shiny silver P-51. And the Coastie, he nudges me. He said, hey, Cop. I said, yeah. He goes, you're never going to top this show. And I said, probably not. Let's go. It was at its heyday, man. It was an unbelievable experience, and I spent 5 years there, and it was just, I couldn't have picked a better 5 years to be there. I mean, and just the relationships I made with so many of the volunteers, the dedication they had. I mean, I know they missed a lot of work. I know they missed personal events. I know one put off stomach surgery, pushed it off till the end because he never missed a show and he wasn't about to miss a show. It's stuff that, yeah, man, it brings tears to your eyes to think about what these volunteers did to make sure that this ran accordingly every single time. And I credit all them, man. It was unbelievable.
How many of those would you put on of those battles, like in a year?
So we did 7 weekends a year. There'd be 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. Used to be 2 and 2. I mean, they tried all different things, right? It's so expensive to do for 100 people. You really want to fill the bleachers there, and you had to watch it with some of the other events going on. So we kind of found that magic number. So it would run from March. We'd open around spring break to November. And the November one, the last one of the year, that Saturday night, I would always I called them Company K. And it was the first initial of the kid's last name who tragically passed away at a very young age, who was one of the early reenactors there. So that's where the K came from. Mm-hmm. Okay. But so we would have a Company K appreciation ball. We'd have a custom made cake. My wife would take care of that. And we'd have a 40s band, and everybody would be in their pinks and greens or, World War II, dress uniform, or if they were active duty, they wanted to wear their active, dress uniforms. And, and we'd have it in the Nimitz ballroom. And I'd always have a special guest, of course, Don Graves would be there several times, of course, when Fred Harvey was still alive. And, it was unbelievable. So that was kind of the magic number, basically 21 of those programs throughout the year, but that's not counting going to air shows or schools or something like that, so, right. Or just some, hey, could you come out and shoot the flamethrower at our event? It'd be cool. Sure.
That's a lot of rehearsing. How often were there like practices of this stuff?
Well, we would really only do training we would do one weekend in February, kind of like a dry run, where everything was the same, except there was no crowd. So we'd still, we'd fire the weapons, we'd test fire everything, we'd run through. But, I'll be honest, I kind of, to me, great leadership is like what Nimitz says. You put people in charge and you stay out of their way. And I had such a great cadre that, they would come and say, hey, I think that this, I was reading about this. We could really implement that. Do it. Show me. Let's execute it. Let's perfect it and build it in. And when you run it like that, it's not like every single movement was scripted, right? Think of it like there were checkpoints, right? So the Marines hit the beach. Once they're at a certain point, I pull the guys off the Higgins, right? So we take both sides of the beach. Then once that was secure, I would send a runner, and what that runner did was 2 things. When the runner comes back, he takes a hit between the 2 trenches there, literally maybe 15 feet from the front row of the crowd. So we're yelling for corpsman, medic. He's screaming, grabbing his leg. We're dragging him under fire. But what that also did was, now when he went over to the Marine Corps side, they would send another runner around the corner to say, spin up the Stuart tank. So by the time we've got this casualty off the battlefield, the Stuart's coming through. And that way I knew nobody was beyond that first main line of resistance. They're still all on the beach. And so that Stuart could roll through and do its thing. Then we bound across that road, and the Army had one sector off to the left that had more of a civilian consideration. There was like bamboo huts and caves, and the Marine Corps had one large cave with like an anti-tank gun, and then a big concrete pillbox on top for the assault team to take care of with the flamethrower. So, and they couldn't get set until my Army guys secured their sector, and that way there was no chance of an Army guy being where he shouldn't have been in front of a Marine Corps flamethrower or vice versa. So, all the cadre knew this. So you could almost put anybody in a green uniform and train them with a weapon and say, follow that dude. And that's it. Mm-hmm. When you break it down to a 3-man team, I could run 80 people on the battlefield with my eyes closed. and we never had a safety incident. So, I mean, yeah, of course. Do we have close calls? Yeah, somebody almost, cut their
It's
hand
going
on
to
the
happen.
inside the Stewart loading a shell. Yeah, you get burnt, or something like that. But I mean, nobody came off bleeding, and oh my gosh, we got to stop the show. So, it was you had to run it that way. You had to run it tight, but it had to be loose enough to where it didn't matter who showed up. It didn't matter what was going on. It didn't matter if something broke down. It still kept going, and the crowd never knew. They never knew if something broke in the middle of the show. They had no idea. It didn't matter.
How long were these usually?
About 70, 75 minutes from the very beginning with the girls singing 2 songs.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that sounds long for people to sit there, and I caught a little flack about that sometimes, but we wanted to give people, you had to kind of get an understanding of everything first. So, like I said, a little bit of entertainment with the girls singing. I would come out, brief them a little bit to set the stage, right? A little bit about Pearl Harbor, a little bit about how we were not the number one military in the world in 1941, and the fact that this particular, what they were about to witness, wasn't any particular combat experience or any particular campaign, because you have Army, you've got Marines. They only were on the same island at the same time on so many islands, right? It's not every island where you see that. We had a Japanese Hago that was painted like one of the Hagos at Peleliu. We had a Chiha that was painted like a Chiha from Iwo. So it was a culmination of, this was the Pacific combat experience rolled into this. Then you would have weapon demonstrations, and you would have the girls. Each one of them would talk about the women's contribution during the war based on if they were civilian or what branch of the military. So they got all this great stuff, all this information, and then when they're just like, oh my gosh, like, just show me already, the anticipation, I want to know more. Then we started blowing everything up.
Right. That's cool, though. You guys took the time to create the atmosphere before you got to
Yeah,
the bullets, beans, and what was the other one? Band-Aids.
Yeah,
Bullets, beans, and Band-Aids.
yeah.
So through, I believe it was through the Pacific War Museum is where you got tied in with a short film project called Walking Point. Is that
Right.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about Walking Point, because I'm working on my own World War II film project. When they approached you, Jeff, what did they want you to? I mean, I know what they wanted you to do, but I want to go deeper into this conversation. What exactly did they ask you to do when it came to the production?
Yeah, so it was a husband and wife team. Husband was the director. He had written the book. Wife was the executive producer, and let's face it, she's the boss. And they both, they were out of Houston, and they both came to one of these shows. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is the production value of this place is unbelievable, right? And so they came up to me after the show. He handed me a book, and he said, man, we're making this short film. Love for you to help out. There wasn't any concrete, this is what I want you to do. It was more of a conversation. And I'll be honest, we had a great conversation with them. I think I gave them a ride in a Jeep after, everybody else was done. So I said, hey, hop in the Jeep. I'll take you back to your car. And then that was it. I threw the book on a shelf in my office, and I was, I don't know how many times people said, oh man, I'm making a short film. Oh, can you help out? Yeah, here's my card. They don't get they don't get the funding. Right? So I'm like, okay. And it was when I was doing Brothers in Arms that Walking Point all of a sudden elevated. And I'll remember distinctly. So Walking Point is Black 17 Productions. Brothers in Arms was Blackfin Productions. I'm starting to get emails from both production companies simultaneously, and I responded to the one thinking it was the other. It was just this huge confusion, and I remember the marketing director was like, "Dude, you need a secretary," because he was copied on. He's like, "You're an idiot. That's not that. That's the New York crew, not this crew." Oh God, okay. Well, initially for Walking Point, it was just as an advisory role, right? With my combat experience and, of course, living history, help them out that way. Brothers in Arms, and this was probably fall of 2018. Brothers in Arms aired November or December maybe of 2018. And after it airs, they call me and they're like, "Dude, you act?" I'm like, "No, it just happened to be in a TV show." And they're like, "Well, we're gonna script you in." I said, "Okay, cool." I'm like, "Man, I'm like Dale Dye now. Ooh, this is gonna be cool, you know." Um, right? So that was so much freaking work to get Walking Point, man. I can't even explain. We had our initial meetings, and I read the script, and I felt bad, but I told the director, I said, "Dude, no, like, no," and we almost had to rewrite every scene. And I said, "I'm not saying this is a bad product. I'm just saying you're not going to hear a Marine call another Marine a soldier ever." um, there's just things that just needed a little fixing. And he's like, "Dude, you're not offending me at all. Like, that's why I'm bringing you on. Fix it." Okay. Um, have you seen the film? Have you seen Walking Point?
I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times, Jeff. I mean,
Okay.
that's how much I'm interested in that film.
Okay. So the original script had Private Markle showing up in a deuce and a half, not a staff car. And I'm like, dude, no, like, younger enlisted is going to be cruising in a deuce and a half in a civilian area with his girlfriend or whatever. So they're like, "Well, what would he be in?" I said, "Well, he'd be in a staff car, if anything, and even that's a stretch." But they said, "Well, what's a staff car?"
Mm-hmm.
What's a staff car? Oh gosh, okay. So I explained kind of like that opening scene from Saving Private Ryan. I was like, the green car with the stars that kind of pulls up, I'm like, oh. They said, "Well, do you have one or can you get one?" I said, "Let me make a phone call." By lunch that day, I had it squared away. And the guy was amazing. I'd worked with him at air shows before. But it was things like that, you know, getting these guys trained. And the best way we train them, and I don't know how many people know this, but the lead actor of the film, Lou Wegner, and let's see, 3 of the co-stars all participated in the Living History event with me. The crowd had no idea that these guys are actors, and they were doing. I said, "This is the best way you're going to train. You're going to roll in. You're going to do a Living History event with us." And that's where we trained them. We showed them how to put leggings, all that, but then, okay, this is how you shoot. This is how you move. This is the posture with the weapon system. So you don't look like you've got 2 left hands and 11 thumbs, and, that was essentially their baptism by fire, was participating in the Living History event. And it was, man, it was golden for the training. So, yeah. So then, of course, that wrapped me in this. I was part of the costume design as well, which is amazing. I share a best costume design award with the other costume designer, who was our executive producer. Mm-hmm. So, our third kiddo was born about a week after we were filming. So, and they knew. I was like, "I got a kid coming." It was the middle of February. I'm gearing up for the next Living History season. It starts in March, and all of a sudden we got to shut down and work on a film for, I forget, 10 days, mostly in Fredericksburg, Texas there. So I was working some very, very long days, and I didn't leave the set. I slept in my office like a regular Living History event. And then, of course, the jungle scenes. I said, "Look, you can't film a jungle scene. This is supposed to be Guam. You can't do this in Texas." I'm like, "What do you mean? We got palm trees." Like, "Yeah, but they're like Mexican fan palms. These are not coconut palms. People who know plants are going to know." I'm like, "Well, where's their coconut palms?" And I said, "My guess would be the closest place would be Florida." So they called around, found this private island outside of Fort Myers, Matlacha, Florida area, Cabbage Key, and it was owned by a former Marine that owned this coconut tree plantation, this tree farm, essentially. And of course, this Marine's like, "Heck yeah, you can film a World War II Marine movie on my place." It was great. And it was really nice. The crew basically planned it around my spring break, so wife and kids could come with me. Kids are out of school. We'd had our newborn. She was only about 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, and here we are driving to Florida to make this, to do these last few scenes. And that's the segue into What's the Scuttlebutt, man, because that's when I first met Don.
Right.
And we hit it off, and he helped out for a whole day on the set. And we had our wrap party that night. I mean, we wrapped, it was the whole film. We wrapped the location, the film, everything, every actor. We were done. And so we're all at this big house that they had for cast and crew. And Don came out with his equipment, and he made like 3 or 4 episodes. And we joke about it all the time because I think on average there was about 2 bottles of champagne for every one of us that was there. And there wasn't any champagne left at the end of the night. So we don't know what we said on that show, on those episodes, but we had a blast. And, it was, again, one of those things where you make just lifelong relationships and friendships, and, getting to work with Duke, the main canine, and, of course, his handler, Ed, who's become a great friend of mine, who, congratulations to him, just retired after 20 years of law enforcement in California. The director and his wife, RJ and Chelsea, and of course working with people like Lou and Liza and Josiah and Ian and Cliff, and just everybody there was just, what a cool experience. And I'll tell you, it gives you pause when you go, well, they wouldn't have done that. That wouldn't have been right. Well, you're not in that advisor's shoes. You're not in that actor's shoes. And now befriending several people from the Band of Brothers and the Pacific miniseries, you understand a whole new take on, we know that's not right, but that's what the director wanted. So that's what we're getting. Or, well, we're going to fudge it because it helps build character development, right? We see that all the time. That give this guy a mustache. He didn't have a mustache in real life. That's a stupid movie. They should have known. You can look at any picture and he didn't have a mustache. Well, they're doing that because the average Joe watching this movie doesn't know who Wade McCluskey is, but they know it's the guy with the mustache now. Okay, yep. Easy character development, right? So it's things like that's what, people think it takes away, but in a way, sometimes it adds production value for war films. And again, they're movies. It's entertainment. It's not a documentary. Yep. We gotta be careful with it. So very thankful, dude. I've been so lucky to be able to do some of those projects, and like I said, just snowball just keeps on going for sure.
And you can see the passion and heart. That was one thing that Walking Point had that I noticed first time I watched it, was heart. And there's just, you can't describe it. There's just some intangible in these type of short film productions where it just, you can tell on the first watch that it's got something to it that projects of the same sizes don't have. You guys recently had Dale Dye on, and he talked about what you just mentioned, which was trying to find those areas of providing your expertise, and then the filmmakers will be like, well, we've got to, change things around here, or sorry, Jeff, we can't do that. I'm curious, and you talked a little bit about this, to you, what was the biggest win for you in terms of your input that they were able to put forth on screen?
Well, I mean, I think I would say the accuracy of the uniforms and locations. When you look at where, if you saw the set, the tent scene, that tent was put up 20 feet from the foxhole in the night scene. And the night scene took so long to film because in the middle of the night, well, not in the middle of the night, but about 11 midnight or so, when we're starting to film, one of the bars in Fredericksburg still had live music blaring. So you're trying, it's a very somber scene, right? With Lou and we're trying to keep out like the Bee Gees cover band "Staying Alive" in the background. like, so to me, that was a huge win. And another thing that nobody else will ever know from this, um, when we filmed the staff car scene, the kid driving it was he's an active duty sailor now, but he was still in high school at the time. Had never driven a car that had anything like a manual transmission, and we literally that scene was filmed right next to the house that was rented for cast and crew. Right, so we're getting set up for the day and having this kid practice driving a little bit, and then we're getting better to okay, this is where you stop, right, to stop on the mark, right, all those little things. And we're waiting for the golden hour, right? The sun's going down, everything's beautiful. And in the meantime, I had to like, hey, that's a 50-star flag on the front porch. We need to fix that. Like just those were the things I was doing without realizing it, right? Like noticing this and that and this, like, oh my gosh. And this one particular scene had so many wins for me. I'll be honest. Like it was just so like if it could go wrong, it went wrong. When Lou's getting out of this car, he completely blows out the crotch of these wool Marine Corps trousers. And we're like, dude, right? Like in rehearsal, we didn't have a seamstress with us. There was no way to like patch this thing up before, again, golden hour. So we're like, and of course they're all looking at me like, well, Jeff, what are you going to do? Like, I don't know. I don't just magically have another pair of these amazing World War II trousers with me. So I went to the producer. I was like, okay, what's Liza wearing? Like, is it obviously summertime? Like, and of course for us, this is February, so it's still pretty cool. And they're like, well, I mean, it's not necessarily. I said, could it be like autumn? Could it be a cooler day, like based on Liza's wardrobe? And they said, yeah, that should probably work. Why? And I said, because I've got a Marine Corps trench coat. Okay, yep. Put this dude in the trench coat, and the footage is perfect because Steadicam guy follows him, and as he gets out of the car, the camera comes up, and you don't see the Wranglers and cowboy boots he was wearing from the waist down because we had no other pair of pants for him. So we fixed that. We fixed the flag, all this stuff. All right, here we go. The sunset's coming. Everything looks perfect. The driver's doing great. And we start filming, and I'm standing back by the director of the photography, and I see the car coming around very slowly. Oh, and he literally looks over me and is like, dude, this is going to be perfect. I was like, oh, yeah, this is beautiful. The car pulls up, and it's not. And I lean over to him, and I said, hey, so how do you guys Greek out the Texas registration sticker in the windshield? And his face just, like, dropped. Like, I'm just asking an honest question, like, how do you guys cut that out on a windshield, right? That's the blue Texas registration sticker. And he's like, cut, oh, stop. And of course, the director's like, what the heck is going on, right? He's like, the freaking sticker. So they're like, oh, my gosh, what do we do? And I was like, I mean, if it was me, it's a sticker. Let's peel it off and ask for forgiveness later. Yeah. And, of course, they didn't want to do that, so we're trying to get a hold of the owner, and he brought his wife down, so they're out at dinner. They're not really answering the phone right away. So executive decision, right? Just freaking peel the thing off and very easily, very nicely, gently set it aside, and then we'll stick it back on. So that's what we did, reset everything, come around, and the final take comes in, and the director of photography looked at me and he goes, dude, you probably saved us thousands of dollars of editing on something like glass that's moving with reflection and glare and the trees and everything. They're like, dude, and I was just asking a question, but I'm glad I caught it, right? Yeah. And so that was kind of the funny story. So that one for me was like, okay, I'm understanding what this takes, the mentality, the stress level is through the roof. So you've got to be able to think on your feet, very, very quickly. So that was a cool win. The booby trapped grenade in the jungle, everybody knows it's a dummy grenade based on the angle, which, yeah, and of course I wasn't standing there for that, or I would have fixed it. But we wanted the
Yeah.
spoon. We definitely wanted the
So,
spoon to fly off, and of course nobody knew that the spoon flew off, was spring loaded. So that was just my dummy grenade from my kit, and I didn't know that's what they needed it for. So I was like, dude, I don't have one that'll fly off. And we're just kind of talking about it in the jungle there, and I just reached over, one of the cameramen, I just grabbed a pen out of his pocket, took it apart. I was like, we have a hot glue gun? Yes, they got a hot glue gun. Perfect. Took the spring out of the pen, hot glued it to the inside of the spoon, and reset it. That sucker sprung. So you do what you got to do. So yeah,
other than the hole, that shot turned out great.
I know, man. And they did that so many times, and for whatever reason, that's the one that made the final edit, and I didn't see it in time. I wasn't right there, and it is what it is.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to take me out of it.
Well, I appreciate that, and I was hoping that would be the case. I mean, you see the top of the bladder, on Wade, the medic in Saving Private Ryan, right? When he's got a couple holes in him, they pull his shirt up, and then they kind of got to pull it back down because that's a bodysuit he's wearing to bleed out, and you can see it in Saving Private Ryan. It makes the final cut. So it happens.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot worse than that. The one that gets me from Saving Private Ryan is the wide angle shot from the side as Mellish is getting plunged with the bayonet, and it's just so obvious his head is sticking up through a hole in a floor. For those who can actually sit through and watch that scene, which not many people can. Yeah. But now there's worse stuff than that, and much bigger productions. But no, I really admire Walking Point, Jeff, and I just wanted to make sure we took like 10 minutes just to talk about it, because I thoroughly enjoyed that production, and it gave me some ideas on my own. So yeah, awesome. I really enjoyed Walking Point. Yeah, it's a shame that it had to get released. Was that released in March 2020?
You better believe it.
That's too bad, man.
I know. Yeah. We dealt with it. We did a lot of virtual, film festivals, and it's a shame because I had it was supposed to open. The first film fest we were going to was in Asbury Park, historic Asbury Park, New Jersey, and so I had a lot of family up there that was planning on coming out. We had several tables, and it was in the hotel that we were all going to stay at, a very fancy hotel. There was some scuttlebutt that some pretty big actors were supposed to, A-list type actors that were going to be there. And I think that's where Josiah got Best Supporting Actor. So it's a shame he didn't get to go up and receive that award. But, it happens. I don't think it necessarily took away from anything that Walking Point did, or I don't think it lost out on any awards. It's more we as the cast and crew lost out on some experiences that would have been, I think, obviously much more memorable than a Zoom call. But no, I think it was good timing. Other than that, and to me, it really showed that independent films can be done. And they can give back. A lot of times they don't get funded, but Walking Point gave back. Walking Point donated 10% of what they raised and gave it back to the National Museum Pacific War for letting us film there, and barring so many things, right? And it's funny. I'm in the tent scene, but when Private Markle walks out, when Private Markle walks out of the tent, I'm also the guy driving the Stewart.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering why they only showed the tracks on the Stewart as it was going by.
Couldn't see my face. So, yeah. So all those things that wouldn't have happened without the Nimitz. So they gave back, and they gave to so many other organizations, especially ones that had to do with dogs that served. and every dog that was used on Walking Point, even Optimus Prime, he's the one that's wounded at the beginning on top of Private
Mhm.
Smiles. It's kind of flashing back. But he since passed away. But these dogs were really special, and to me they really made the film. Duke was an amazing dog to work with. That's his name in real life. It was his name scripted in the film. It worked. Um, so yeah, it definitely shows that this can get done. It just takes dedication, and people who believe in the project and believe in the story. And I think people willing to work with each other. I think the main co-star Liza, she really said it best when she's done a lot of film, a lot of work, and she said this was one of the most memorable, smoothest run films she has ever done. She said, I have never left a film project feeling like I'm leaving behind family, not just friends,
Mm.
but family. And I still, I made a dog tag. I made a custom dog tag for every one of the actors. It had their character name on it, and then it said, I think I put like Walking Point 2020, whatever. Had all these custom dog tags made for them, and of course, they've got them on display wherever. They've got some of their stuff that they kept from the film, and we still chat. I follow them on some of their new film projects, and I hope to work with Lou again. We tossed around the idea of a remake of Secondhand Lions, if you're familiar with that old film. Um,
Yes, yeah, very much. Yeah.
but it would be from the perspective of when those two guys were younger, like that. That would be super cool.
Right.
So, we there's always something in the works with me. But yeah, I hope it's an inspiration to people like you, because it can be done. It looks like an uphill battle, but it can be done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I just one last Walking Point question for you. In the quick shot where the Japanese soldier has his Type 99 pointed at the camera, and the dog attacks him, did that dog actually attack that guy? Was that visual effects?
Um, yes and no. It was definitely not visual effect at all, but Duke was not an attack dog, so he's docile, right? He sniffs out the dope.
Right.
So, so what we had to do was Ed literally picked his dog up and threw Duke onto the actor, and it took a few times because Duke was like, "No!" right? Like, and I think we put Duke up on a table to kind of have him get set, so he was already kind of elevated because he's a big dog, big European Doberman. And Ed's no small guy either, but so right off the edge of the camera there, he would just pick him up and he just threw him until he finally landed on that poor kid. And so there's no visual effect there at all.
Yeah. I mean, I was utterly convinced, and that's why I had to think, like, God, did they go in and like CGI any of that?
Yeah.
It was damn good. I was really impressed by that.
We definitely got a good laugh out of that scene. Just
No,
come
I'm
on,
sure.
dude, come on.
And when you're watching it, there's nothing funny about it. I mean, it is a very intense scene.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I commend you guys for pulling that off. That was fantastic. Well, Jeff, we're closing in on 1 hour, and I'm sure you've got something better to do on your Friday night. However, we are going to close it off with a fun topic. Let's jump into the 8th Air Force real quick. A couple months ago, I think you and Dennis, did you guys end up watching the entirety of Masters of the Air?
Oh yeah, we did.
Okay, so what were your thoughts on it?
Oh man. Dennis did a real good job. He had already seen it, and he had done a real good job of not giving me any kind of false pretenses or anything. He stayed just didn't give me anything. And my biggest reservation with it was, and you may have heard me say this on What's a Scuttlebutt, I'm a huge Elvis fan. Austin
Yep,
Butler
yep.
as Elvis was the Elvis movie that every Elvis fan has been waiting for so long. And how do you un-Elvis Austin Butler? And so I was a little concerned. And I had read the book a couple years ago, and not knowing that's what it was going to be based off of. I read The Mighty Eighth, Gerald Astor's book. I read that, and then I just, all right, let me read Donald Miller's Masters of the Air. And like I said, not realizing that was the one that they were really using. So to know Buck and Bucky, what I read, and then hearing that's who he was playing, I was like, I don't know about this. And I was setting myself up for disappointment. I guess, the soldier in me, prepare for the worst, and then anything less is that much better. But I guess I just didn't want to get my hopes up so high, because I was like, okay, this is either going to be the film that I've always wanted, or they're just going to take the subject matter that is so near and dear to me and make it to where it will sell. And that's not what they did. It's exactly what I was hoping it would be, and so much more. They completely nailed it. Yeah, can you pick it up? Can you start picking it apart? You probably can, but I don't want to. I don't want to. And it is so pristine in so many other ways that you got to look past some of the other goofy stuff. I can't say no. I just finished it again. We watch it now. I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times. And it was my oldest daughter. She's 13. She goes, Dad, I want to watch Masters of the Air. I'm like, okay, how about this? It's long, right? It's just, so we watch Band of Brothers every Christmas, and then we watch the Pacific in the summer. And so Masters of the Air now has been built into this tradition where over Thanksgiving week, that's when we just watched it. We're out of school and all that. So I just watched it again, just last week or so. And for my wife, it keeps getting better. She has now seen it maybe 3 times. This may have been her 3rd time. The first time she was like, I can't really, like, Band of Brothers gets her every time. And I told her, I said, sweetheart, it's because you don't know the characters as well yet. And it took her a while for the Pacific, right? Like the Pacific, she's like, I don't really like it. It's not like Band of Brothers. Not what I thought it was going to be, blah, blah, blah. Well, the first time I handed her the phone and said, hey, babe, talk to Scott Gibson, she was like, oh my gosh, it's Captain Howdy. Yeah. And now all the times that we've got to hang out with him, it's like, okay, now she's a Pacific fan. And I knew it was going to be like that with Masters, because you get confused if you don't know the story. Bucky, who the heck is who? Yeah. And then everybody's like gone. It seems like, what the heck is going on? But she told me, she said, wow, the music is starting to get to me now. Like Band of Brothers gives you the chills, right? Like the music is just amazing. It's an amazing musical score. But dude, I mean, the 100th, of course, the Memphis Belle and the 91st Bomb Group, that's what's painted on my Jeep, and that's what I've got on my bomber jacket. But as a big scale modeler, and you probably know this from the podcast, I build a 100th Bomb Group B-17. I build Argyle Sal. And I just, reading Masters of the Air, reading Damn Lucky, and talking and meeting John Luckadoo several times, and having some wonderful conversations with him. I've just, 100th Bomb Group was just really kind of, it was a whole new interest for me. And now Masters comes out, and of course, right, it's the bandwagon of everything's bloody 100th now, right? Which is great, which is fine.
Yeah, sure.
Jump on it. Let's do it. Let's keep this thing going. So yeah, man, some of those scenes, some of them really, really get me. And I'll tell you the one that probably will always get me. And you may know this as well from What's the Scuttlebutt, but so as a gunner on a Humvee, I had a driver and a truck commander, 3-man team. We were very, very tight, and lost my driver to suicide a couple years ago now. And we were in a very small unit to begin with. There was only like 48 of us in the whole troop. So very, very small, tight unit. And he's not the only one we lost to suicide either, unfortunately. But it was like, not him. he and I were supposed to be 90 years old talking about whatever this war is going to be known as, talking about our time in Baghdad. And when Crosby finds Bubbles' letter,
Mm.
I, it hits me. It hits me pretty hard because when you lose your best friend because of a war, because of something like war, uh, it does something to you. And they highlighted that in an extraordinary way. Aside from all the other things that they did amazing, the the detail in the B-17s inside and out was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Showing the way they masked off the tail to paint the big square D, properly showing the interior colors in the cockpit, in the bombardier's hatch, showing the variations in how the guns were mounted up in the nose. I mean, I can go on and on about. They just nailed it. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
They simply nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, they sure did. And I've watched it through once, and I plan on doing it again. I just having so many different damn streaming services adds up after adds up after a while. So I'm hoping at some point we can just buy it on Amazon Prime. But
I have
to be seen.
zero streaming services. I bought the DVD. I don't know how many months ago for $20.
Oh, okay, really?
And it doesn't look like it's pirated. It doesn't play like it's pirated. Yeah. Everybody's been coming to me. You're the first one I knew that bought that. How was it? Through Walmart, of all places. Walmart.com. Had it for $20.
Wow.
I've had that thing for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months now. Whenever it can. I don't even know. I've had it for a while. Yeah, DVD Blu-ray.
I'll be damned. Okay. All right. Now I know what I'm doing after this.
Yeah, $20. Yeah. And it comes on 3 discs. Right. Parts 1, 2, and 3 are the first disc, and so on and so on. It's in one case, and it's not a fancy.
Just like BOB in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's all right. Any behind the scenes stuff or special features?
I don't know. I don't remember seeing any on the last disc. No. So it might be pulled from Apple and pirated, and I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it.
But hey, Walmart's selling it, so must be
right.
Legit. Okay, all right, that's good to know. Yeah. Plug that one away for the old memory box. Yeah. Well, Jeff, this has been a fantastic conversation. I certainly hope to have you back at some point because we could certainly talk more 8th Air Force stuff and more model airplanes and more things World War II. And like I said, at some point, the wife and I will be traveling to Texas because after listening to What's the Scuttlebutt, we were actually swayed by you guys talking about the National Museum of the Pacific War. And that's probably going to be our preference over going. And at some point, we'll go to New Orleans and check out the National World War II Museum. But I think we're pretty dead set on coming down your guys' way. And obviously, and let's talk about your museum real quick. So this is it's the Highland Lakes Squadron of the Commemorative Air Force. What's the name of the museum?
The Highland Lakes Air Museum. Yeah.
Okay. And you guys put on an air show when?
So yeah, the air show is we coordinate it with the spring break here. So it's the last weekend of spring break, which is typically the 3rd weekend of March. And this will be the 32nd, 33rd, maybe annual air show. From a volunteer standpoint, I directed that museum for about 3 years. Let's see, I left probably about a year ago. I did my time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did my time. I shook things up. I did a big 8th Air Force mural on the one wall and reintroduced some new ways. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. But of course, I still do the ground show, the ground demonstration, for the air show. I'm still involved when they call me and, hey, we need help with this or how do we do that, whatever. I'm still there, but I had to trim the fat, honestly. It had nothing to do with the museum or anything else, but, to be teaching full-time, to be a full-time online history student, getting my degree, having 4 kids, directing a museum, being the president of the board of directors for the library in town, and then getting wrapped up into another independent World War II film where I'm supposed to be an executive officer of the Pathfinders that jump in Normandy. Something has to give. Just couldn't keep up with that pace. So I left the library, left the museum, of course, still support them. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on December 7th, the library is doing a swinging hanger dance, a swing dance, or a swing in the history dance, whatever they want to call it, at the hangar. So I'll be one of the attractions there. You'll see me in my best 8th Air Force dress uniform, pinks and greens, and my Jeep will be on display, and I'll have a Pearl Harbor display there. Dennis will come out. So to help the library raise money, help get awareness for the museum, but that's as far as I get involved. Call me when you got an air show, and pretty much that's about it.
Okay. So the last question before we jump off, being an educator, and while this episode won't come out tomorrow is Pearl Harbor Day. And I asked this question to Dennis, do you believe the subject of the Second World War is in good hands going forward? Do you think that interest will still be there for future generations?
Only if there's people like us that keep it going.
Okay.
Who knows what, I'll just give you an example. Who knows what would have happened had the South won at Gettysburg? Mm-hmm. But we don't really celebrate anything about the Battle of Gettysburg, right? What's the 3rd of July? Nothing to people now. If we allow that to slip by, World War II will just blend in the annals of history, just like Gettysburg, the Normandy invasion, the Calais, Waterloo, Thermopylae. It's just in the past. I fully believe that December 7th is so important because that's when our country got its identity. Its birthday is July 4th, 1776, but its identity was forged out of the destruction of December 7th, 1941, and I cannot be convinced otherwise. What happened because of that morning, the chain of events since then that we still feel the effects from, we cannot let that disappear into oblivion and just blend in with yesteryear. So it's going to take authors, film directors, people who do podcasts, reenactors, air shows, people who restore World War II vehicles, hand a kid a steel pot, let them climb in a tank, let them look inside your airplane. Like, that's what it's going to take because, from the educator's standpoint, there's not a whole lot of background knowledge that you're pulling from in today's teenagers in high school when you ask them about the Civil War, World War I, World War II. There's not a lot there, and it's nothing against them. We got to stop saying, well, this new generation. Well, this new generation of of Greeks thought that they could never stand up against the Persians, right? Like, there was always that talk, this new soft generation. So we got to get away from that narrative. You got to put yourself in their environment. What is exposing them to World War II besides a couple paragraphs in a history textbook, maybe a movie, probably a video game? And if they don't have a relative that serves, so where else are they getting it? There's not much background information being instilled in them. So that's what our job is. That's our duty as people who love history. We have to make sure it lives on. And I know all too well how important it is to remember those who sacrificed their lives for something bigger than themselves. So in my opinion, no, World War II is not going away anytime soon. In my opinion.
Great. Well, I think that's a good one to end on. And Jeff Copsetta, thank you so much for joining World War II Above and Below. And we will see you guys next time.